"Now I am right glad," said the sheriff, when the man came up and found that Little John was not dead. "That I have not slain this man is my highest. I would rather lose 500 pounds than have him die, this instead of hanging, as such a vile thief should do. Go get some water from yonder fountain, William, and pour it over his head." The man did as he was bidden, and presently Little John opened his eyes and looked around him, all dazed and bewildered, the stun of the blow. Then they tied his hands behind him, and lifting him up, set him upon the back of one of the horses, with his face to its tail and his feet strapped beneath his belly. So they took him back to the King's Head Inn, laughing and rejoicing as they went along. But in the meantime the widow's 3 sons had gotten safely away and were hidden in the woodlands. Once more the Sheriff of Nottingham sat within the King's Head Inn. His heart rejoiced within him, for he had at least done that which he had sought to do for years, taken Little John prisoner. Quoth he to himself, "This time tomorrow the root shall hang up on the gallows tree in front of the great gate of Nottingham town, and thus shall I make my long score with him even." So saying, he took a deep draught of canary. But it seemed as if the sheriff had swallowed a thought with this wine, for he shook his head and put the cup down hastily. "Now," he muttered to himself, "I would not for 1,000 pounds have this fellow slip through my fingers, yet should his master escape, that fool Guy of Guisborough, there is no knowing what he may do. For if he is the cunningest knave in all the world, this same Robin Hood. Belike I had better not wait until tomorrow to hang the fellow." So saying, he pushed his chair back hastily, and going forth in the inn called for his men together. Quoth he, "I will wait no longer for the hanging of this rouge, but it shall be done forthwith, and that from the very tree whence he saved those 3 young villains by stepping betwixt them and the law. So get ye ready straightway." Then once more they set Little John upon the horse, with his face to the tail, and so leading the horse whereon he sat, and the others riding round him, they went forward to the tree from the branches of which they had thought to hang the poachers. On the way, rattling and jingling along the road till they came to the tree. Hereof the man spake to the sheriff of a sudden. "Your worship," cried he, "is not yon fellow coming along towards us the same Guy of Guisborough, whom thou didst send into the forest to seek Robin Hood?" At these words the sheriff shaded his eyes and looked in eagerly. "Why, certes," quoth he, "yon fellow is the same. Now heaven send that he hath slain the master thief, as we will presently slay this man." When Little John heard the speech, he looked up, and straightway his heart crumbled away within him. For not only were the man's garments all covered with blood, but he wore Robin Hood's bouldered horn, and carried his bow and bore the sword. "How now?" cried the sheriff, when Robin Hood, in Guy of Guisborough's clothes, had come nigh to them. "What luck hath befallen thee in the forest? Why, man, thy clothes are all over blood." "And thou likest not my clothes," said Robin, in a harsh voice like that of Guy of Guisborough. "Thou may shut thy eyes. Marry, the blood upon me is that of the vile outlaw that ever trod the woodlands, and one whom I have slain this day, I ride not without wound to myself." Then out spake Robin Hood, for the first time since he had fallen into the sheriff's hands. "Oh, thou vile bloody wretch, I know thee, Guy of Guisborough, For who is there that hath not heard of thee, and cursed thee for the vile deeds of blood, rapine? Is it by such a hand as thine that the greatest heart that ever beat is still in depth? Truly thou art a fitter tool for this coward sheriff of Nottingham. Now I die jollyful, nor do I care how I die, for life is naught to me. So spake Little John, the salt tears rolling down his brown cheek. But the sheriff of Nottingham clapped his hands for joy. Now, Guy of Ginsburn, cried he, if what thou tellest me is true, it will be the best day doings for thee that ever thou hast done in all thy life. What I have told thee is sooth, and I lie not, said Robin, still in Guy of Gisborne voice. Look, is not this Robin Hood's sword? And is not this his good bow of yew? And is this not his badger horn? Thinkest thou he would have given them to Guy of Gisborne of his own free will? Then the sheriff laughed aloud for joy. This is a good day, cried he. The greatest outlaw dead, and his right-hand man in my hands. Ask what vote will of me, Guy of Gisborne, and it is thine. Then this I ask of thee, said Robin. As I have slain the master, I would now kill the man. Give this fellow's life into my hands, Sir Sheriff. And thou art a fool, cried the sheriff. Thou mightest have had money enough for a knight's ransom, if thou hast asked for it. I like ill to let this fellow pass from my hands, but as I have promised, thou shalt have him. I thank thee right heartily for thy gift, cried Robin. Take the rouge down from the horseman, and lean him against yonder tree, while I show you how we stick a poker whence I come. At these words, some of the sheriff's men shook their heads, for though they had cared not a whit whether Little John were hanged or not, they hated to see him butchered in cold blood. But the sheriff called to them in a loud voice, ordering them to take the yeoman down from the horse and lean him against the tree as the other bait. While there were doings, this Robin Hood struck his bow and that of Guy of Gisborne, albeit none of them took notice of his doings. Then, when Little John stood against the tree, he drew Guy of Gisborne's sharp, double-edged dagger. Fall back, cried he. Would ye crowd so on my pleasure, ye unmanly knaves? Back, say I, farther, yea. So they crowded back as he ordered, many of them turning their faces away that they might not see what was about to happen. Come, cried Little John, here is my breast. It is meet that the same hand that slew my dear master should butcher me also. I know thee, Guy of Gisborne. Peace, Little John, said Robin in a low voice. Twice hast thou said thou knowest me, and yet thou knowest me not at all. Couldst thou not tell me brief the wild breast's height? Yonder, just in front of thee, lie my bow and arrows, likewise my broadsword. Take them when I cut thy bonds. No, get them quickly. So saying, he cut the bonds, and Little John, quick as a wink, leaped forward and caught up the bow and arrows and the broadsword. At the same time, Robin Hood threw back the crow of horses hidden from his face and bent Guy of Gisborne's bow with a keen barbed arrow fitted to the string. Stand back, cried he sternly. The first man that cutteth fingers to the bowstring dieth. I have slain thy man, sheriff. Take heed that it is not thy turn next. Then, seeing that Little John had armed himself, he clapped his badger horn to his lips and blew 3 blasts, both loud and shrill. Now when the sheriff of Nottingham saw those face it was beneath Guy of Gisborough's hood, and when he heard those badger notes ring in his ear, he felt as if his hour had come. "Robin Hood!" roared he, and without another word he wheeled his horse into the road and went off in a cloud of dust. The sheriff's men, seeing their master thus fleeing for his life, though thought that it was not their business to targle longer, so clapping spurs to their horses, they also dashed away after him. But though the sheriff of Nottingham went fast, he could not outstrip a cloth-yard arrow. Little John twacked his bowstring with a shout, and when the sheriff dashed in through the gates of Nottingham at full speed, a grey goose shaft struck out behind him like a moulting sparrow with one feather in his tail. For a month afterwards the poor sheriff could sit up on naught but the softest cushions that could be gotten for him. Thus the sheriff and a score of men ran away from Robin Hood and Little John, so that when Will Studley and a dozen or more of stout yeomen burst from out the cover, they saw naught of their master's enemies, for the sheriff and his men were scurrying away in the distance, hidden within a cloud of dust like a little thunderstorm. When they all went back into the forest once more, where they found the widow's 3 sons, who ran to Little John and kissed his hands. But it would not do for them to roam the forest at large or any more, so they promised that, after they had gone and told their mother of their escape, they would come tonight to the green wood tree and therefore become men of the band.